Welcome to my YouTube channel and my radio podcast. And this particular podcast is the old you versus the new you radio podcast. I'm your host. Y'all know who I am by now on my podcast and on my YouTube channel. Y'all know who I am as well. Thank you guys for joining me for this episode. If you guys want to hear more of my podcast, you can go to Spreaker.com/the old you versus the new you podcast, or you can go from darkness to life recovery coaching, and you can check out my podcast there. I am a certified recovery life coach. It's all about helping people on their paths, their journeys, and their purpose to a new and better you through self-discovery. Now, my podcast didn't get to hear part one of the episode that I'm doing today, but I figured I would do part two to the episode. Now, for those of you who don't know, and on this podcast, you don't know, I am currently in the first week of my sabbatical. Well, my pre-sabbatical. I decided that Sunday is going to be my official day of my sabbatical. And I was going to do it this week, but I realized I've been getting off track. And I've been prepping myself for this sabbatical because when I start this sabbatical, a lot of things are gonna change. A lot of things I'm not gonna be doing that I'll be doing prior. So let's talk about this sabbatical because this has something to do with this particular topic when it comes to, do you want to be the same or a better version of yourself? And this sabbatical is what's gonna tell me whether or not that's the case. And on my other account, I didn't get a chance to do this video because I was having issues as far as logging into it. So I want to have this particular conversation. So I don't show myself because right now it's not about what I look like. It's more about what it is that I'm saying than what I look like. So let me start there. So if I'm going to do this as a podcast, then I'm going to do this as a podcast, meaning that it's not about seeing my face. It's not about what I look like. It's about what I'm speaking on. And the reason I chose to do this on my YouTube channel and my other channels is because people judge people on what they look like and not what they're saying. And if a person is unattractive, then they're not going to really listen to you. So even though you have credentials, even though you're certified, you have a degree, you have a diploma, people still are not going to listen to you if you are not a certain thing or whatever the case may be. Now, I may have to end up getting up for a second because I ordered something. I had a taste for something sweet. So I decided I wanted to get something to eat. But I want people to understand that when it comes to this particular topic, I need people to understand it's a very touchy topic because for a lot of people, they want to remain in the same place, meaning they want to continue doing the same things and thinking they're going to get a different result when in all actuality, you're not going to get the results that you want. Now, when it comes to a sabbatical, I need people to understand why a sabbatical is so important. And I'm going to do a video on this particular topic. But because this falls into what my sabbatical is, we're going to talk about my sabbatical. Now, a sabbatical is a time of rest, a time of reflection, a time of isolation, a time of hibernation, a time of a cocoon phase that you go through when you need space away from everything and everybody to get some type of clarity. This could be like moving in silence, like the 48 laws of power. So for some people, I need people to understand that a lot of people may wonder, why are you distancing yourself from me? Why haven't you called me? What in the world is going on? This ain't got nothing to do with y'all. When people distance themselves, it's not always because they don't want nothing to do with you. It's because they're going through something and they don't want you to be a part of it. And it's something that they got to face on their own. And every person, as a godly person, is going to go through that. But the problem is, a lot of people, when it comes to going through these situations, you want to basically bring everybody and their mama involved in something that has absolutely nothing to do with them, period. You're bringing people in stuff that they shouldn't even be a part of. And if you really love and care about the people you love and care for, why are you bringing them in something that has absolutely nothing to do with them at all? And that's the part I don't understand. You have people on social media that are sitting up here telling people this way and that way of how to lose weight, but don't do the research as far as understanding the fact that people are different. Everybody's different. Everybody goes about things in a different way. Everybody goes around thinking things in a different way. Nobody's the same. So when you're helping people understand, every person's going through a different situation at a different point of their life. And the reason I want to talk about sabbaticals and why sabbaticals are so important, you need time to rest. You need time to enjoy life. You need time to do more than just work every day. Taking care of kids all day, taking care of a husband or wife all day. You need a sabbatical. And at one time, a sabbatical was something that was important because of the fact of their work-life balance. So at one time, it was about that. So what I'm gonna do is, somebody's coming to bring me some food, so they're about to come knocking on my door in a second. So I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna talk about this video about sabbaticals. And I will be right back in 1 second after they grab my food. So we're gonna watch this one here.
Step into Wix Studio, the platform for agents.
Hold on, wait on commercial. Hold on a second. Let me wind it back and then pause it. Give me 1 second. Let me pause it and then press play.
Gift that God has given us to live and abide in what the Bible calls his rest. And I believe this is one of the key areas that is a battleground for many believers. There's a war over this area of you really experiencing the power of what rest can mean in your life. And the concept of rest, the precept and power of rest, is found all throughout the scriptures. And so I want to bring out a couple of key points to help you to understand how you can begin living in rest and to recognize that tension so that you can break through some areas and experience the refreshment that's available. God has promised us to be able to experience rest. We first saw this in the concept of a day of rest. We see it in creation where God ceased from his works, and on the seventh day, he rested. And one of the things that we can experience is to know that on a regular basis, taking a day of rest is a helpful practice. It's even been studied that one of the best practices is to work for 6 days, and on the seventh day, to take a break, to cease, to stop, to rest. It's not something that should be a legalistic binding thing. It's a gift. Jesus said the Sabbath was made for man. It's a gift and an opportunity for you to say, it's okay to stop. And for many people, it's a struggle to stop. There's a battle to stop. But that Sabbath day, that Sabbath speaks of to cease. And there's some things that we can learn out of taking a day and learning to utilize that in our life is to stop, to bring everything to a calm, to allow refreshment to enter into our lives. Most people are not living a life of refreshment. And so they may stop, but when they stop, they don't experience refreshment. Maybe they just zone out or numb out or collapse because they realize They may be taking a day of rest, but they're not living in a lifestyle and rhythm of rest. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to stop. When God ceased from his works, he looked and saw that it was good. He took time to look back on what had been done. And one of the practices you need to begin to have in your life is moments where you stop and reflect. You reflect on the things that God has done throughout your week. Do you look back at maybe some of the things that took place, the great things, or the things that God has helped you to begin to manifest and see happen, and just stop and appreciate it? Most of the time, we just move on to the next thing, and we don't take in the refreshment that's available in just reflecting on what God has done. There's also a rhythm that this brings into our life, a rhythm of output and input, receiving from God, receiving from stillness, receiving in the stopping, in the ceasing, so that when you output, you're outputting of what you've inputted. Most people live in a burnout lifestyle. And one of the reasons, this isn't the only reason, I'll get to more in just a second, is they don't allow the rhythm of day of rest, days of rest, pit stops throughout the day. I believe that we should have pauses throughout every day where you stop and rest. In fact, every night you are given a moment to stop and rest and go to sleep. All throughout the cycles of life, God has inserted moments, whether it's being still and knowing that he's God, taking time to meditate on who he is, to get quiet, to go to sleep at night and give the entire day and the next day and the future over to him. When you sleep, it's a signal of, I can't do anything. I need this. I have to stop. And it gives your life in an act of surrender over to God. And so we don't live in that rhythm of rest because we don't take those pauses. There's a fight over that, isn't there? There's a fight over, I got to stop and I got to cease and I got to slow down and really reflect on what God has done, who he is, and learning to live in that power of ceasing. So the Bible talks about ceasing from your works. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into the argument of what day would be a Sabbath day. When I worked in church ministry, Sunday was a pretty active day. And so there was no way that was a day of rest. I actually had to use another day to be a day to cease so that I could learn to quiet myself. And this concept of rest became something that God used as a theme of discipleship for years. God, Mark, I want you to understand what it means to live in my rest. So the second place we can understand in rest is a place, location. And this brings us to the Old Testament where God talked about the promised land. This is a place that you're going to, a place of freedom. Now, Israel stepped out of the area of bondage they were in and moved towards the promised land. But we all know they wandered, and they carried a lot of the slavery of Egypt still within them. So what we learn in the book of Hebrews, it talks about in Hebrews 3 and 4 about the place of promise and entering into that promised land was a place of rest. But then the Hebrew writer brings us into a deeper understanding that rest isn't really a place, a location. Now, for many of you, when we talk about rest, sometimes what you think about, I'm going to go to the beach, I'm going to sit there and look at the waves. I'm going to go to a mountain cabin. Well, what I need to go into the woods. Now, that may be true, but what happens is we develop a fairy tale understanding of what rest is. So it brings us into a third aspect, a deeper understanding, and that is a lifestyle of rest. Because you could have a day of rest, you could have pit stops throughout your day, but still not live in the lifestyle of rest. So this can be meaningless if it's not cultivated within. Or you could say, I'm going to go to a place that's going to cultivate a restful environment. I'm going to go to the beach, or I'm going to go to the park, or I'm going to have this special spot. You know, we all have that like special spot. Maybe it's that place on the couch, or that's that prayer room, or that spot in your yard where you sit, and it's good. It's okay to have a place to remind you of rest. The promised land was a reminder of rest, but the greater rest of lifestyle that you can live in.
Okay. So again, taking a sabbatical means taking a moment of rest. It means going into isolation. It means you are just one with the higher power. Regardless of what you call it, you're taking the time to be one with the higher power to see where your next moves are going to be. So let me give you an example from a life coach perspective as far as, the best time to take a sabbatical. The best time to take a sabbatical is when you are in a place where nothing seems to be going right. When you hit rock bottom is the perfect time to take a sabbatical. When you just lost your job, when you are out here and you're homeless, or you just got out of a marriage or a really bad relationship, that sabbatical is going to be needed. Why? Because when you first go through that situation that you're dealing with, it's going to hit you emotionally. And you're going to panic and you're going to be like, what am I going to do? I'm going through this situation. I don't know how to handle it. Oh my God, I'm stuck. But what do most people tell you? The best way to get over an old relationship is to get into a new relationship, which is incorrect. You should be by yourself to figure out, number one, what happened in that relationship and where it went wrong and why you dealt with this person in the first place. When you're going through a financial sabbatical, it should be you figuring out why you're not working. Do I want to work for somebody else or do I want to work for myself? This is when you sit down with yourself and you talk to the higher power and figure out what is your next move going to be. I need y'all to understand that when it comes to prayers, not only does God hear your prayers and Jesus hears your prayers, but the devil and all these demonic spirits also hear your prayers. Another reason for a sabbatical can be you need a break from your kids. Your kids been driving you crazy. You might have just found out you have cancer. You may find out you have a life-threatening disease and you're just like, what am I going to do? Why do you think so many people do bucket list? Bucket list is a prime example of a sabbatical. It's a journey. It's a path, and it's to find a purpose. Everything with a sabbatical is a purpose. So it's not just about, just getting physical rest and going to bed for 8 hours and getting sleep. It's about the fact that you have to work on your internal health, your external health. You got to figure out what works for you as far as your body is concerned. Like, for example, I had a sweet craving because I haven't had sweets in the past while, except when I was at home with mama. So I decided to get some fried Oreos and some cinnamon buns, but these don't look like cinnamon buns, but that's another godforsaken story. But it's all good. But anyway, am I gonna eat all of this and then continue to eat sweets? No, I'm gonna eat this because this will probably be the last time for the next few months of me eating sweets because of inflammation. Do you see what I mean? So I decided to take this week to do a rest and getting all of this mess out my system. Because this sabbatical, once I started, there's no turning back. It's about doing what's best when it comes to my sabbatical. But let's watch a little bit more of this video about a sabbatical so you guys will get a better understanding of it. And I'll come back with my commentary.
The Hebrew writer said in Hebrews 4, there exists today a rest for the people of God. Rest is a condition within the kingdom of God within, where you're living in a cycle of refreshment, yielding to the work of the Holy Spirit, where at its optimum level, you're not drained, you're not exhausted, you're living in God's rhythm. And there's two extremes that we battle when we see this rest. There's a tug of war over people living in the rest of the kingdom of God. To walk in that confidence where you're stepping out with power, but you're not just trying to stir it up in your own strength every day. There's a reliance and a confidence on who He is in you. But it's not passive. It's not just sitting around doing nothing. In the battle over rest, we tend to find ourselves into two extremes, two ditches. Which one do you find yourself falling into? One is the ditch of striving. Fear, doubt pushes us into a place of striving. Striving says, if it's to be, it's completely up to me. I got to make this happen. And it's very deceptive because many believers can say they're doing things for God, living with God and doing things for the kingdom of God. But really, they live in a lifestyle of striving, endless toiling, and there's a fearful lie underneath.
Let me stop right there. That's why I'm on my sabbatical, because a lot of the things I did in my past, a lot of the things I did when it came to trying to help people and being a people pleaser, Captain Save-A-Ho, a Build-A-Bear, and a Build-A-Doll, is why I'm taking my sabbatical. I didn't even realize that I was taking a sabbatical until recently. I've been on a journey since 2019, and I take it very seriously. Now, what I will say is these sabbaticals, there's no date, there's no expiration date. You can take a sabbatical for 6 months or 6 years if you want to. Sometimes you don't even know you in a sabbatical until somebody talks about it. And if it wasn't for Pastor Todd and Transformation Church, I would have never known I was on a sabbatical. And this whole entire time I've been on a sabbatical, but yet I kept going back to bad habits, going through these bad intentions. And it was where I was not focusing on building my business. I wasn't focused on other things. I was more so trying to be on social media, trying to build a business and build a brand on social media. And God kept saying, get off social media, take a social media break. You need a break. And I'm coming to that realization that God was correct about that. That the old version of myself was someone that was so busy focusing on everybody else, I did nothing for myself. I didn't put myself first, which in terms affected my health. Now that I'm putting myself first, I'm still dealing with the chronic pain and the hurt. But that's part of the reason I'm doing this today, as far as flushing out all of these things that I don't want to repeat, that I want to go through again. So when it comes to the old version of myself, it pops up. And sometimes you don't even realize the old version of yourself is still there. Oh, it's still there because you're still associating with the same people. You're still doing the same things over and over and over again. So even though you think that you've changed because externally you lost weight, or because you got a new house and a new car or a new marriage, does not mean you're not the same person that you were. And the one thing about being the older version of yourself is no different than an infection that comes into your system. And instead of doing something to cure it or to heal it, you just put a Band-Aid on it and just let it be that. So a sabbatical is a way of making you focused on the things that need to be focused on, that are very extremely important. So let's go back to this video and let's listen to a little bit more.
That means if there's to be any wealth, if there's to be any provision, it must come out of what's happened with my own hands. And it's tricky because you can have two people doing the same work. One is living in rest, one is living in striving. How do you know the difference? It's the fruit of what's manifesting in their life. The one who's striving doesn't know how to stop. In fact, the most torturous thing I could do to those who live in striving is to put them in a room to stop with no television, no things to stimulate their mind, and just sit in the silence. It's excruciating because they're used to living in the buzz of stressful activity. And they ramp up their mind and their thinking and their activity to that buzz. Because if they let go of the buzz, they've got to learn to enter into rest and learn to have a greater sense of trust, have a greater sense of confidence in who their Father is in heaven and his ability to work in your life. We also have to get still and realize we got to face ourselves, face our fears, face our insecurities, face our brokenness. And this is why many people can't seem to experience greater healing and greater transformation. They're just so doggone busy. So the Hebrew writer in Hebrews 4 says, you got to cease from your works if you want to enter into that rest. There are many dead works we involve ourselves in. Stuff that's really great activity. It looks wonderful to people. But God's saying, I want you to get my rest. It's actually more simple than that. We add on and stack so much onto our lives. But the fruit of that striving is more stress, more burnout, a burnout lifestyle, irritability, anger. Our relationships don't have the vitality and quality that they could have. Our relationships suffer. We get easily discouraged, easily worn out because we're constantly in that buzz. Now, another ditch that we can easily fall into is the ditch of passivity. Now, for most people, they will find in certain areas of their life, they're heavily striving. They'll also find there may be other areas where they're very passive.
Okay. Why is that important when it comes to striving? You have no idea how many people are striving for something, and then when they get it, they don't know how to keep it because they want something else. It's just like boredom. A lot of people hate being bored, but don't understand that boredom just means you're not in the middle of chaos and destruction. You're not into something that's going to jeopardize your life. Now, when it comes to excitement and everything like that, that can be a good thing if it's positive. But when we're striving for something, it never ends. You don't get sleep. That's like people that are CEOs of companies that are up all night and working all through the night to build their businesses and their brands. And then you have other people who, after they're done with their meetings, they're done for the day. They're not up all night. They're actually getting rest. They're actually getting sleep. And then they get up, they do their meetings. Some of them do their meetings in the golf course. Some people do their meetings out of the country. But even when they go out of the country, they're still enjoying themselves. Excuse me, I have acid reflux. They're still enjoying themselves. So it's not as if they're not still going out and having a great time, because they are. They're having a fantastic time. Whereas the rest of us who work regular 9-to-5 jobs can't even go on vacation without our jobs tripping out about us taking 2 weeks off to go on vacation. That's the whole reason why they give you your PTO 3 hours at a time. So that way you won't use your full 2 weeks. And then the reason you don't get sick leave anymore is because if you have sick leave, then what? So like I said, at the end of the day, when it comes down to striving for something, the problem is, when is it going to be enough? Because it's not about what you obtain, it's about what you maintain. And a lot of people ain't trying to maintain nothing. They just want it before the moment because it's there. And then when I get bored with it and I get tired of it, then I decide I'm gonna get rid of it. I don't want it anymore. I want no parts of it anymore. And that's the old version of yourself. The new version of yourself is I'm content with $100,000. $100,000 is cool for me because I'm not going to go and buy a bigger and more expensive home because I made $100,000 a year. If I made $100 million a year, I'm still not going to go and buy a home that's 4 point something million dollars where taxes on it, and I got to be able to maintain that money. I got to be able to maintain the fact that even though, yes, I might be making a lot of money, it doesn't mean I'm going to spend a lot of money because I never know what may or may not happen. So again, it is about maintaining things. But for the people in the world, it's more about striving, but you don't want to keep what you got. You just get rid of everything you got versus not getting rid of it until you don't need it no more. Or something wrong with it, or it breaks. But some of y'all will sit there and get rid of something that is perfectly fine. Even in relationships, y'all get rid of people that have been there for you through the trenches and get rid of them for somebody else. It's beyond crazy to me. But let's learn about passive sabbaticals, passive people when it comes to rest, and we'll see how that go. Because I'm definitely going to talk about both of these when it comes to the sabbatical series, but let's continue. I just wanted to introduce y'all to this before I get into it.
Or you can find yourself leaning heavy towards one or the other. But we do know that fear will do its work to push you in either direction. It'll cause you to either gear up into striving or cause you to avoid in passivity. Even the term fight or flight, right? Our stress response system, fight, go into striving. Flight, I got to get out of here. And passivity is one of the modern plagues that is hitting our culture. A spiritual lethargy, inactivity, but it's not just about what you're doing physically. It's an internal thing. It's a spiritual slumber. And so what it does is it disconnects you from the power and confidence of what's available to you in the rest of God. See, the rest of God is not sitting on the couch doing nothing. The rest of God is very active, but you're being empowered and refreshed. So what you live out is a manifestation of God's Spirit in your life. Passivity will lead you into a spiritual slumber. It's a spiritual coma that rests over your life. Many people are numbed out, checked out, living in a passive state. This plague has hit a lot of men in the family, making them very spiritually, emotionally inactive, where maybe at work they're heavy striving people, but when they come home, they're spiritually and emotionally unavailable. And so this passivity creates a plague because when we're in that, it creates a lot of damage to the people around us because you could take action, but you don't. And so over and over again, we see this thing. It creates a slumber over your heart. And the Bible says, be diligent to get into the rest of God. Kind of sounds conflicting, doesn't it? Hurry up and get into rest. Wake up and get into rest. It's kind of like somebody saying, wake up and take a nap. That's not what God's saying. God's saying, be diligent, watch out, because you could fall into a spiritual slumber. And when that thing hits you, you'll justify it. You'll kick back when anyone tells you that you should be taking action, or maybe you're hesitant or you're procrastinating. The fear of failure really hits the passivity area where you sit and cycle through. Maybe in your life, it's like you sit there and ponder over, and you need to just take a step of faith. But you live in a spiritual passivity. The fear of failure taunts you. In striving, the fear of failure can be there too. The fear of loss, the fear of not having enough, the fear of facing yourself if you slow down the RPMs. So to the person striving, the Bible says in Hebrews 4, cease from your works, slow down, let go, let God begin to work in your life. Stop thinking the pressure's all on you. Take that yoke off you and learn from Christ and do an exchange so you can walk in that peace and walk in that rest. So where do you find yourself? In the striving world? In the passive world? I found that many times I'd ping pong between the two, but I found myself heavily leaning towards the striving area.
Now, let's talk about the passive. A lot of people think people are lazy. So let me give you an example of a passive person. A passive aggressive person is a person that is really laid back. They're really chill. These are people that are more so, let's go with the flow type of thing. You know, they're pretty much people that's like, whatever's meant to happen is going to happen. These are people that either other people are helping them to build what they build, or these are people that basically have a dream but don't want to do the work that it's going to take to make it happen. Or on the flip side of that, you got people that have the ability to do it, but because they don't have the support and they have so many people telling them they're not good enough, they're not worthy, that all of these different things, especially your parents. Your parents can be the biggest part of why people are either striving or passive, but especially passive. If you keep telling a child they're not good enough, they're not worthy, they're never going to be this, they're never going to be that, that impacts a child. And then when you get older in age and you got to tell your parents how you feel about something, and they can't understand why it is you're so upset, why it is you're saying to your parents, look, you didn't believe in me, and because you didn't believe in me is why I ended up in the situations that I ended up in, why I was looking for love somewhere else. Because if you think you don't commit infidelity against your parents and your parents commit infidelity against you, if you think you don't commit infidelity against your family, including your siblings, then yeah, you do. Anytime you're in a relationship with somebody, you're going to commit some type of infidelity towards somebody. That is the way that is. So at the end of the day, like I said, there are people that are very passive aggressive and they'll only do the bare minimum. And then you have other people who are passive, who are trying to strive, but yet they're so scared of failure because in their mind, they keep hearing their parents or other people around them saying they're not good enough and they're not worthy, and they never finish what they start. They'll start something, they won't finish it, and then they'll go back to something else. See, all of these things are important in order to figure out what type of recovery that I, as a life coach, am supposed to do towards you. Because I have to find out if you're somebody that's a striving person or a passive person. Because the way I deal with you is going to be different. So everybody's different. And then there's some people that are just in between them both. There are people that overwork themselves, and there are people that underwork themselves. And then there's people that's in the middle that have the ability, but because they have so many naysayers telling them they can't do it, they don't do it. Or they end up getting pregnant or something else happens. So we really have to talk about it from that perspective. So I'm glad I found this video. So let's continue the video. I'll be back in a minute.
So as I began to learn the healing journey and walk the heart healing journey with God, one of the things that he began to show me was, Mark, I want to show you the understanding of the power of rest. And it was probably for quite a few years, this theme kept being highlighted. I mean, imagine that. You're trying to ask God and seek him, and the only thing that's coming back is, I want to teach you about rest. I want to teach you to understand rest. And one of the big ways that I was immersed into learning a deeper understanding was in the power of taking a sabbatical. And it actually came at a really difficult time in my life when I was pastoring, and I was frustrated. stressed out and burnt out. And here I was actually teaching people on how to be emotionally healthy. But the work and labor in people's lives began to take a toll on my life. And it was challenging to manage it. It was challenging to manage the responsibilities of my growing family and learning to grow in my marriage. And all these areas began to show signs of you need to enter into rest in a greater degree. And I remember driving in a car seeking God, and I was really frustrated. And I wanted him to address the problem that I was bringing to him. And all that came back was sabbatical. And I'm like, what does that even mean? What does that even look like? And I began to read on it and see that many other people have had to do that. And it became a powerful experience of me learning to slow down for an extended period of time. See, because what you need is you need a day. You need pit stops throughout the day. You might need a favorite place that becomes your reminder of rest. You need to live in a lifestyle of rest. This is the key. But there are also times where you need to take an extended break because life has a way of systematically eating away at some of our faculties and being able to remain in rest. And without even realizing it, you can get so used to how you're living, you don't realize you're becoming passive. You're striving. Or maybe you're striving so much and it burns you out and you go into a depressed, discouraged, lethargic, passive state. And what you need is you need to just stop and have an extended time, an extended break from your work. Now, as a full-time author, teacher, coach, and consultant, I roll up my sleeves all the time and work in very challenging situations in helping people work through very difficult heart-related issues, emotional issues, spiritual issues in their life. And so I've had to utilize the power of sabbatical as a powerful reset to refresh, to restore, to allow God to speak into my life. And so I remember the first one that I took was for a couple months. And I'm a person that believes in being emotionally healthy. But do you know, many years ago when I first took this sabbatical, it took me about 2 weeks of stillness and fighting through some of that discomfort to get into a greater place where I could hear God's voice, hear his promptings, and sense what he was doing in the simplicity of his heart over my life. 2 weeks. And so people say, well, what is a sabbatical? Well, it's an extended break from your work. Now, you may not be in the line of calling and work that I'm in, but it doesn't matter. You may need a sabbatical. A sabbatical is not a vacation. Most vacations are, you take your kids to Disney World, you go camping, or you do things. It's very, very active. Most people come home from a vacation saying this, I need a vacation from my vacation. They're usually exhausted from it, right? I'm not saying you can't go to Disney World on a sabbatical. What I'm saying is that that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is you actually slowing down to nothing so that you can begin to see yourself and God in the silence, in the quiet, face some of the areas of your life, face some of the issues and struggles you're going through, to be still and know he's God, and to face the modern day buzz. I, on a daily basis, and you on a daily basis, have to fight the resistance of busy. I believe one of the predominant demonic strongholds over modern culture is busyness. Just constant activity. So you're so busy, you don't know what God is doing and what he's not doing. You don't know what God is involved in and what he's not involved in. You equate God as doing everything because you're in a buzz and you can't pay attention to things that you go, you know what? I need to let that activity die. I need to let this thing die. God's just not in that right now. Modern Christians just look at everything that's busy and we think it's all God honoring to just stay busy.
Let's talk about that. Please, let's talk about that. Because that is something a lot of people do. You have a lot of people that'll say, I'm working overtime, and they're cheating. It's a lot of people that'll say that they'll work overtime just so they won't go home. Everybody keeps thinking when you take a sabbatical, it's a vacation. No, it's not. A sabbatical is you going somewhere to find some type of peace and tranquility. It's about being one with God and sitting down and reading your Bible. It's about praying and doing spiritual baths. It's about cleansing and relinquishing all the negativity. It's about breaking these habits that you got. It's about figuring out who the new version of yourself internally is going to look like. Because until you figure yourself out internally, you can't fix yourself externally. If you got people that are dealing with issues internally medically that they have to deal with, then they can't fix themselves externally until they fix the health issues that are going on internally. Because there are people that got health issues internally, but yet they're drop dead gorgeous externally. So you have to work on yourself internally. So sometimes you do need to take a sabbatical. Sometimes you need to say, okay, I'm going to go to China for 14 days. I don't care whether I come back and got a job or not. I need a mental health break. I need to go on vacation. I need to get away from it all. That is the whole reason why you're not supposed to work until you're 85 years old. You're really supposed to be done by 40. But because we're in a society that doesn't want to teach you about the importance of owning your own business, the importance of being successful on your own, no, they don't want a lot of people to be business people. They don't want a lot of people to be successful. So that's why I went on a sabbatical, because I figured if I break these habits that I have, then I'll be able to finally write this book these books I've always wanted to write. I can finally be the author I always wanted to be. I can finally do this jewelry. I can finally do that versus being on social media all day, every day. So you see what I mean? That's the whole point of going through a sabbatical, is to go through a journey and a path to find your purpose. And while you're on this purpose, you should be journaling your purpose. Like Sunday, I'm going to journal how my week has been. The first week, pre-week of my sabbatical. So when I actually get into my sabbatical, I'm going into it full force, because the whole purpose of my sabbatical is to be able to finish what I started. No interruptions, no nothing. Even if it's me working out in the morning, even if I do 15 minutes of workout, I've done what I said I was going to do. So it's not about going out. It's not about being with somebody. It's really about you working on yourself. And that's the most important thing when it comes to recovery, is that. So let's get back to the last part of the video, and I'll be back in a minute.
And that's not what God's word talks about. He's called us to live in the rest of God. So many of you will say, man, I need a sabbatical, but you might say, I can't afford one. Well, even there's times when I've taken them, I have to take a step of faith to trust God for resources at a deeper level. And that was part of the rest I had to enter into. Now, it may not be, maybe you have a job that you can't take that much time off of, but maybe you could take a break from certain things, maybe ministry responsibilities, maybe volunteer things that you have. Maybe you just clear out as much of your schedule as possible to just take a season for a few months to go, we're going to cease from our works. We're going to understand what it means to be in the rest of God. And we're going to slow down and take some walks, have extended quiet time to just be still, not to sit there and get busy about praying. Maybe it's more about just receiving, reflecting, journaling. Sabbaticals are phenomenal times of writing for me, because as I get still, I just let the flow of writing happen and let God speak. In fact, many of my book materials have come out of sabbatical times and seasons. I do extended reading and just letting God work in my life. I intentionally have conversations with people that I know will sharpen me, that will speak into my life. And in fact, my family's gotten used to this, that when we take that, they understand what it's about. And it models, hey, we want to learn not just from day, place, but we want to learn the lifestyle of what it means to live in the rest of God. So it confronts the battle over your life to get quiet and get still. Because in getting quiet and getting still is where you regain your confidence. You regain your refreshment. Now, it'll take a learning curve. Sometimes, most of the time, is just learning to bring the RPMs down and the buzz down. Then the next level is facing yourself, facing pain or facing brokenness. And most people don't get past that threshold. They get back into busy living because the quiet and the pain's too much to deal with. But if you hang in there with God, or maybe get someone to help you a little bit, you can enter into the refreshment of rest, where the psalmist said, he leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. So where in this conversation do you sense God speaking to your life and where you're at? You don't have to apply everything I said. Just pay attention to the thing that bubbles to the surface. And I pray the power of God's rest, the power of Sabbath, the power of sabbatical will begin to invade your life. You could receive it and receive the blessing of who God is in understanding his rest.
Okay, so now do y'all see why, when it comes to me as a life coach, why I do things so differently? Because when you with me, you're in a sabbatical. When you're with me, you're working on yourself. And I am no way the higher power in any capacity. But I am someone that can help you guide you through this going through Wonderland and following the rabbit down the rabbit hole and constantly going through these situations over and over and over again. Because once you figure out why you're doing it, we're going to figure out how to stop it. So it is about solutions. And as a coach, it's very much about solutions and figuring out how to solve problems. It is not about trying to be in these crazy situations where you're constantly going backwards, taking 2 steps forward and 40 steps back. So I want people to be able to move forward and being able to live the life that they want to live without worrying about the approvals of other people. And that is the one thing that has been the hardest thing, is when you have people telling you, oh, you're not good enough for that. You're not worthy of that. You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that. At the end of the day, like I said, everybody every day is telling somebody how to live their life. And for me, it's not about telling you how to live your life. It's about you deciding what works for you, and me being the guide and helping you to get the things you need to make you a better person. So let's talk about the different type of sabbaticals you can go on. You can go on a sabbatical when it comes to mental health, psychological health, emotional health. You can go on a health sabbatical when it comes to illnesses and diseases. You can go on a weight loss sabbatical where you're losing weight. You can go on an emotional sabbatical where you're learning emotional intelligence. You can go on a educational sabbatical, a spiritual sabbatical. You can go on a relationship sabbatical, and you can go on being alone a sabbatical where you're working on yourself. So whatever it is that's going on in your life that's causing you problems, those are the sabbaticals you need to take. And sometimes there are more than one. And as you, like I said, once I do this 12-step program, y'all gonna understand there are different 12 steps depending on what you're dealing with. So I'm really excited about doing these courses, and I'm really excited about doing these webinars, and I'm really excited about writing this book about recovery. So I'm definitely going to journal this recovery thing. So what I did was last week and this week. Last week was more or less me prepping for the sabbatical, and I'm still prepping for it. This week was all about sleep. It was all about rest. It was all about also getting myself prepped for no social media, not anything satanic that I'm going to be entertaining, no fornication. It's going to be all about my weight loss sabbatical, which is 6 months. I'm giving myself 6 months to lose about 40 pounds. It's also a sabbatical when it comes to learning about my body and what works for it and how to prevent myself from having inflammation. I have some supplements I'm getting ready to start buying that I'll be taking throughout the day. I'll be working on cooking more at home than going out to eat. Definitely excited about that. I have a couple more things. I did buy some things, but I'm mainly going in eating some starches to basically get carbs, but I'm cutting down on salt and sugar intake unless, my sugar is low. I want to always make sure I keep my sugar where it's not going to be low. Another thing a lot of people don't understand is when it comes to calcium. Calcium is important because of your bones. And I don't understand how is it now everybody's saying now is an issue with cows, but it ain't never been an issue before. At the end of the day, you can't drink your mother's milk forever. So for you to think that you can't have some type of milk, you can. So I mean, like I said, it's just a confusion. Like some people are lactose intolerant. So again, like I said, one thing about me as a life coach, I try to work with everybody because everybody's different. Not everybody's the same. But when it comes to a sabbatical, it's not something that you shouldn't take as a joke. And anybody who doesn't support your sabbatical, you shouldn't be dealing with in the first place. When you go on these sabbaticals, it's about finding answers. It's about being one with the higher power and finding some type of peace and tranquility. And once you leave that sabbatical, please don't go back to chaos. Please be careful who you bring into your world. So I'm going to talk about not only the sabbatical while you're in it, but what happens when you get out of your sabbatical and why it's important to not interact with negative people. So I hope this series that I'm doing helps not only you but millions of other people as far as finding the answers you need to be a better person and to be able to to go through this rehabilitation in order to be newly habilitated, to go from being from recovery to newly covered, and from going from being reborn to newly born. So if you want to have one-on-one coaching with me, or you want to write me letters telling me what you're going through and giving you some inspiration, please email me at my email address, which is asha.mariama01 That's asha.mariama01 If you're interested in coming on my podcast or coming on my YouTube channel and my other platforms, please send me an email and I would love to have you on my actual show as a guest. I have some guests that have reached out to me about coming on their platform, and I told them I'm going through some medical issues, and I have, matter of fact, there's somebody I have to read their book, and matter of fact, I'm doing that during my sabbatical as well, where I'll be reading their book while I'm doing a sabbatical. So, with that being said, I want to thank you guys for joining me for this episode. I'm your host, Goddess Asha Mariama. I appreciate y'all for joining me on my podcast. And for those of y'all on my YouTube channel, I appreciate y'all as well. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notification button to receive notifications of my videos. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye. Have a good evening.